too.
So here's what I've been thinking about. It's been obvious to me for some time that, for some reason, the fundamental claim of postmodernism is something like an infinite number of interpretations and no canonical overarching narrative. Okay, but the problem with that is, okay, now what? No narrative, no value structure that's canonical or overarching, so what the hell are you going to do with yourself? How are you going to...
Holy fucking shit. Seriously, Jordan? This is what has been so obvious to you? That when we advance as a society and question our past belief systems, eventually we may throw them out. They may no longer work, and our understanding of the world and human behavior has delegitimized our past interpretations. Your intellectual observation is, what do we do without some type of guidance? We do the same thing we've been doing for thousands of years. We will figure it out. Like when we didn't understand thunder and lightning and made up the mythology of Thor and his hammer to explain it. And then eventually used science and realized that there's a lot more than just some random deity in the sky behind it. We will figure it out. You want an overarching theme because you can't figure it out yourself. Okay, how about this? We should move towards what will bring about the best outcome for all human beings, individually and collectively. There, I figured it out.
Orient yourself in the world. Well, the postmodernists have no answer to that. So what happens is they default, without any real attempt to grapple with the cognitive dissonance, they default to this kind of, this loose egalitarian Marxism.
Oh God, without a roadmap to guide our society, we're all doomed. Get the fuck out of here. Do you need a parent to constantly guide you through life, Jordan? How about this? Join the military. They will give you all the direction you need to function. And here comes the boogeyman Marx. Egalitarian Marxism. What word salad is this? Why is it wrong to believe that all people are equal and deserve to have these equal rights and opportunities? When did this idea become evil? And why does everything that has to do with treating people equally have to be conflated to communism? I guess that's what you meant by throwing the Marxist term in there. Or maybe you're just pandering.
There was so much evidence that had come pouring in from the former Soviet Union, from the Soviet Union at that point, and from Maoist China, of the absolutely devastating consequences of the doctrine, that it was impossible to be apologetic for it by that point in time.
When we speak about bettering our communities and our current life situations at the collective level, why the fuck is it always construed to be communistic or socialistic? Why can't we speak about it in the confines of our current political system instead of setting up this straw man over here to knock down so that we never talk about the real issues liberal democracies face? I'm tired of hearing about how bad Russia and Maoist China were. Can we move to some new talking points?
On the right, I think we've identified markers for people who've gone too far in their ideological presuppositions. And it looks to me like the marker we've identified is racial superiority. And I think we've known that probably since the end of World War II, but we saw a pretty good example of it in the 1960s with William Buckley.
Did you hear that? Peterson just said that racial superiority is an extreme of the right, that it's not a left idea.
Because Buckley, when he put out his conservative magazine, the David Duke types kind of attached themselves to it. And he said, no, here's the boundary. You guys are on the wrong side of the boundary. I'm not with you. And Ben Shapiro recently did this, for example, as well, in the aftermath of the Charlottesville incident. So what's interesting is that on the conservative side of the spectrum, we've figured out how to box in the radicals and say, no, you're outside the domain of acceptable opinion. Now, here's the issue. We know that things can go too far on the right. And we know that things can go too far on the left.
You're so fucking profound, Jordan. When you turn a light switch on, the light turns on. When you flip it off, the light turns off. Genius.
But we don't know what the markers are for going too far on the left. And I would say that it's ethically incumbent on those who are liberal or left-leaning to identify the markers of pathological extremism on the left and to distinguish themselves from the people who hold those pathological viewpoints.
We don't know the markers of going too far to the left. We most certainly do. Complete government control of every aspect of your life. Complete government control of the economy and the means of production. Anyone advocating for straight up communism are the radicals, in my opinion. It's the concept of the collective being too overpowering of the individual that the individual is no longer a concept. That's too far on one side. However, if we want to talk about being too liberal, then what we will get is this global mediocrity. Things will become so mundane because we've all reached this point of pure equality. Life would be kind of boring without some aspects of minor inequality. I do believe that inequality can motivate people to do incredible things. It's when inequality is at an extreme that I have problems with.
And I don't see that that's being done. And I think that's a colossal ethical failure, and it may doom the liberal left project. Like, the lefties have their point. They're driven fundamentally by a horror of inequality and the catastrophes that inequality produces. And fair enough, because inequality is a massive social force, and it can produce catastrophic consequences. So
I wonder if Peterson says this because he really cares about the individual strife caused by massive inequality, or he just doesn't want to see revolutions. Maybe he says this because he's afraid of pitchforks and torches at his doorstep demanding change. Regardless, Peterson understands that massive inequality is a problem, which many on the right don't agree with.
to be concerned about that politically is reasonable. But we do know that that concern can go too far. Okay, so I've suggested that there's a triumvirate of concepts that bear the same, that, what would you say, have the same potentially catastrophic outcomes when implemented as the racial superiority doctrines. Diversity, inclusivity, and equity as a triumvirate, even though you can have an intelligent conversation about two of those anyways. But I would say that of the three, equity is the most unacceptable, the doctrine of equality of outcome. And it seems to me that that's where people who are thoughtful on the left should draw the line. Say, no, equality of opportunity, not only fair enough, but laudable. But equality of outcome, it's like, nope, you've crossed the line. We're not.
So, I have already expressed in a previous video that I don't think people will ever have the equality of opportunity. I think we should strive to create both in the absence of one. Where we can't seem to have equality of opportunity, then we should try to create equality of outcome to a degree. Most people who want equality don't want true equality. We are more concerned about the levels of inequality that stem from injustice. If someone legitimately works hard and doesn't take advantage of other people, then I think most people wouldn't be upset about their position in society. Or that if you're a hardworking individual, you can climb the class structures eventually in your lifetime.
Going there with you. Now, maybe that's wrong. Maybe it's not equity. That's my candidate for it. But it is definitely the case that you can go too far on the left, and it's definitely the case that we don't know where to draw the line. And that's a big problem. Well, an example of equality.
We do know where to draw the line. You say it all the fucking time. Marxist, Marxist, Marxist. Yeah, like straight up communism would probably be the marker of the extreme left.
Equality of outcome is attempts being made now to implement the legislative necessity to eliminate the gender pay gap. That's a good example. I mean, you think, well, no, that's not, like, there's nothing pathological about that. It's like, oh, yes, there is. You have to set up a bureaucratic inquisition to ensure that that's the case. It's like, it's not good. And that's actually a relatively, like, of all the things that you could push for with regards to equality of outcome, that's rather simple and definable. It's not even murky. Once it starts to get murky, it's just complex beyond any rectification. You cannot win if you play identity politics. There's a bunch of reasons. Like, here's one. Let's push for equality of outcome. All right? Who measures it? That's a big problem. It's not a little problem. It's not like we'll figure that out later. Oh, no, no, no. The measurement problem is paramount. So you don't solve that, you don't solve the problem at all. Who measures it? A bureaucracy. Okay, which bureaucracy? Well, a large one that has its fingers everywhere. Okay, that's problem number one. And it's staffed by exactly the sort of people that you don't want to staff it, by the way.
Who measures it? You mean who collects the data? Yeah, a central institution under our government should. Our government should be non-biased towards collecting information. I don't see why this is a problem. Did you mean who interprets the data? Well, then we have one government institution to do that, staffed by experts in that field, not people who want to see the institution destroyed, and allow outside agencies to access the same data and draw their own conclusions. We then meet and discuss our interpretations and figure out if we have a problem. Sort of like what we have now with think tanks and government watchdogs.
Next problem. Which identities? That's the intersectional problem, right? The radical leftists have already hit the problem of intersectionality. It's like, well, we've got race and gender, let's say. Well, okay, what about the intersection between race and gender? That's a multiplicative intersection, right? So you might start with 3 racial categories and 2 gender categories, but you end up with 6 intersectional categories, and then you're just getting started. How many genders? Hypothetically, there's an infinite number. What about racial groupings? You're going to include ethnicity? You want to add class to that? You want to add socioeconomic class? How about attractiveness?
How about attractiveness? That's completely subjective as compared to someone's race or gender. You can't measure one's attractiveness like you can their race. Stupid fucking point.
And every time you add another category to the singular entities, you increase the multiplicative entities in a multiplicative fashion. What are you going to do? You're going to equate across all those categories? Really? And across what dimensions? What are the dimensions of equality that you want to establish? It's just socioeconomic. Is it just salary? What about all the other ways that people are unequal? You're going to just stop with economic inequality, are you? It's like, it's a complete bloody catastrophe.
That's why we have to discuss what dimensions, Peterson. You know, when you want to measure something, you have to define the thing you're trying to measure. It is possible that the gender pay gap is because people don't value women's work as much as men? Maybe. Is it possible that the pay gap exists because of the fields women choose to be in and how negotiable they are? Maybe. But this is why we measure these things and come up with theories as to why. And guess what? If, from our conclusions, we find these gaps exist because of injustice, then we most certainly should be worried about it. You see, we have the power to create our own reality per se. Everything around us has been created by our own doing and understanding. Our political and economic situations exist because we have willed it to be so. We don't live in a world in which there are these fixed economic and social structures that have always existed. We have changed them, and we have the power to continue to change them. And we should, as long as it leads to the betterment of advancing humanity towards a positive trajectory for all. We have the ability to create change, contrary to what many Christians believe. This idea that we don't have enough of a divine spark to create change in our world. It is what it is. No, fuck that. We are the creators. We are the molders, and it's our duty to continue to do so. Thank you for listening. I hope this brings up some new ideas to you, and we can discuss them in the comments or whatever. Thanks again for listening.